Before sunrise in the English countryside, a 4-year-old boy walked into a wheat field with a bag of stones. He stayed there until dark. When birds landed, he ran toward them, shouted, and threw stones into the air. If the field became quiet, the farmer assumed he had fallen asleep. 12 hours of work earned him 1 penny. He was not called a scarecrow. He was a bird scarer. But he did the exact job we later gave to a wooden cross dressed in old clothes. And England was only one chapter. Greece placed an ugly god in its vineyards. Japan used burning hair before imagining a scarecrow who knew everything. America tried to destroy the birds with explosives. And in one nearly empty village, scarecrows are now used to bring missing people back. Across different regions and centuries, people kept placing a human shape where no human could stay. Why? The answer begins before the scarecrow had a face. More than 3,000 years ago, farmers along the Nile had a problem. When grain ripened, quail arrived in large flocks and fed on the crop. The Egyptian solution was simple. Farmers stretched nets over wooden frames and waited nearby. When the birds landed, people rushed out, shouting and driving them into the nets. It was not really a scarecrow. It was a trap. But it shows how old the struggle is. Wherever people grew food, birds arrived to eat it. The Greeks made an important change. Instead of hiding a person near the field, they left behind something that looked like one. Their chosen guard was Priapus, a fertility god whose statues were designed to be shocking and ugly. Farmers carved him from wood, painted him, placed a club in one hand, and stood him beside vineyards and gardens. He was supposed to frighten birds, warn trespassers, and protect the land from bad luck. One wooden figure was doing the work of a guard, a threat, and a god. Then a Roman poet named Horace gave this garden guard a voice. In a poem written around 35 BC, Priapus tells his own story. He says a carpenter found a piece of fig wood and could not decide whether to make a bench or a god. The carpenter chose a god, so Priapus ended up guarding a garden on Rome's Esquiline Hill. One night, he sees 2 witches digging for bones under the moon. He wants to chase them away, but he cannot walk. He cannot swing his club. He is only painted wood, so he frightens them with a huge noise from his wooden backside. Yes, one of the oldest surviving scarecrow stories ends with a fart joke. But beneath the joke is the main problem every scarecrow has. It looks human, yet it cannot move. In Japan, farmers found another way to create fear. At first, they did not care what the object looked like. They cared what it smelled like. Imagine a Japanese rice field at dusk. A bamboo pole stands above the water. Tied to it are old cloth, hair, fish, heads, and bones. Then the whole bundle begins to smoke. The smell is terrible. That is the point. Burning hair and rotting fish kept birds from coming close. Some farmers even hung dead crows from poles as a warning to the rest of the flock. The modern Japanese word for scarecrow is kakashi. It is often linked to the older word kagashi, meaning something like to make it smell. The name remained even after farmers began making human-shaped figures from straw, with raincoats, hats, and sometimes a bow. But Japan did more than give the scarecrow a human body. It gave the scarecrow a mind. The Kojiki, Japan's oldest surviving book, was completed in the year 712. Inside it is a god named Kuebiko. Kuebiko is a scarecrow who stands forever in a mountain rice field. Rain falls on him. Seasons pass around him. He cannot take a single step. And somehow, he knows everything in the world. In one story, a mysterious stranger arrives by boat. None of the nearby gods know who he is. At last, a toad tells them to ask Kuebiko. The god who has never traveled anywhere immediately knows the answer. It is a strange but beautiful idea. Because Kuebiko never moves, he notices everything. People come and go. The field changes. The village changes. He remains in the same place, watching it all. Kuebiko is still worshipped at a shrine in Nara as a god of knowledge. Students visit him before exams and ask the motionless god to help them remember. In Japan, the scarecrow had become something sacred. But in Britain, the figure in the field was often not sacred, wooden, or stuffed with straw. It was a working child. For centuries, British farmers hired children to protect their crops. They were known as bird scarers or bird shooers. Most were older than the 4-year-old from the beginning of this story, but many started very young. Before compulsory schooling, guarding a field was often one of the first jobs available to a poor rural child. The tools were basic: a bag of stones, a wooden clapper, and a loud voice. When crows, rooks, or starlings came down, the child chased them away. When the field was empty, the child waited. There was little shelter, and often no company. Some worked from sunrise until sunset in cold, rain, or summer heat. They were not allowed to become quiet. Silence could mean sleep, and sleep could mean a damaged crop. Children caught resting could be beaten. The fear of birds went far beyond individual farms. Tudor law described some birds as vermin and offered money for dead ones. Villages created sparrow clubs, whose members killed thousands of birds and collected rewards. For the farmer, this was not a small problem. A lost crop could mean debt or hunger. But the people placed between the crop and the birds were often the poorest children in the village. There is no single confirmed moment when someone invented the familiar straw scarecrow. It probably developed in different places over time. But major labor shortages made a cheap, human-shaped substitute much more useful. After the Black Death reached England in 1348, somewhere between a third and half of the population died. Workers became harder to find, and surviving laborers could demand higher wages. A stuffed figure could not run, throw stones, or shout. But it also did not need food, rest, or payment. Farmers filled old clothing with straw, fixed it to crossed poles, and sometimes added a head made from a sack, turnip, or gourd. It looked enough like a distant person to startle a bird, at least for a while. The living bird scarers did not disappear overnight. Children were still doing the job in Britain centuries later. The practice declined gradually as schooling expanded, child labor rules changed, rural wages shifted, and farming adopted new tools. The human worker and the straw figure existed beside each other for a long time. That matters, because the scarecrow was never a perfect replacement. Birds quickly learned that it did not move. And when European settlers carried scarecrow traditions across the Atlantic, they met crows that were just as difficult to fool. America's response was not to build a better scarecrow. It was to declare war on the bird. Immigrants brought different field guardians to North America. Pennsylvania German farmers built the bootsman, or bogeyman, a wooden cross with a rough head, old overalls, and often a red cloth around its neck. Some added a female companion called the Bootsefrau, the bogey wife. In the Southwest, Zuni communities made frightening figures from cedar poles, cloth, and animal skins. Different regions gave the scarecrow their own clothing and character. But the basic weakness remained. A crow might fear a figure on the first day. Then it would watch. If the figure never moved, the crow returned. By the early 20th century, many American officials stopped trying to scare crows and tried to remove them instead. More than a dozen states offered bounties. During the First World War, killing crows was presented as a patriotic act that would save grain. Organized crow shoots followed. Then people began using explosives on the huge winter roosts where crows gathered at night. Hundreds of thousands could be killed in a single campaign. Oklahoma is estimated to have killed millions during the 1930s and 1940s. The strange part is that government researchers had already warned that crows were not simply enemies. They also ate insects and rodents that damaged crops. Reviews found that bounty programs often produced little value for the money. The killing continued anyway. Over time, farmers adopted other forms of bird control: moving devices, loud noises, netting, treated seed, and changing farming methods. Large farms also had very different needs from the small family fields where a single child or straw figure once stood. The scarecrow slowly stopped being essential equipment. It became a symbol of autumn: old clothes, pumpkins, harvest festivals, and children's stories. Its practical job was fading. But far away, in a mountain valley in Japan, the human shape in the field was about to find a new purpose. This time, it would not be built to make anything leave. It would be built because so many people had already gone. Nagoro is a small village in Japan's Iya Valley, on the island of Shikoku. The roads are narrow, mountains rise on both sides, houses sit beside steep green slopes, and the quiet can feel heavier than the landscape. The village once had hundreds of residents. Many families were connected to work on a nearby dam. When the work declined, younger people moved to cities. The village grew older, the school lost its students, and house after house became empty. In 2002, A woman named Tsukimi Ayano returned from Osaka to care for her father. One day, birds began eating seeds she had planted. Ayano built a scarecrow and dressed it to look like her father. She copied his clothes, his face, and the way he stood, then placed the figure in the field. People passing by mistook it for him. Some slowed down, some greeted it. So Ayano made another figure. Then she made more. She recreated neighbors who had died and people who had moved away. She placed them where they might once have been seen, working in gardens, repairing a road, resting beside a house, or waiting at a bus stop. The village began to fill again, but not with living residents. Today, hundreds of these figures are spread through Nagoro, while the number of real residents has fallen below 30. Ayano has made replacements when rain, wind, and snow wear the older ones away. Some accounts describe a registry that gives the figures names, ages, and personal stories. The village school closed after its final students graduated. Inside, the desks are no longer empty. Child-sized figures sit in the classroom, facing a teacher at the front. They look ready for a lesson that will never begin. Once a year, the village holds a sports day. The figures gather in the old schoolyard while the remaining residents and visitors take part around them. From a distance, Nagoro can look busy. Up close, every figure points to someone who is missing. And this is where the story connects back to Kuebiko, the Japanese scarecrow god. Kuebiko could not walk, but he knew everyone who passed through his world. Ayano's figures cannot move either, but together they remember an entire village. The scarecrow began as a way to protect food. In Nagoro, it protects memory. Every region found its own answer to the same problem. Some used nets or smells. Some used gods, children, wooden figures, noise, or violence. The methods kept changing because birds are intelligent. A still figure may frighten them at first, but they learn quickly. There are plenty of photographs of crows calmly sitting on scarecrows. So why did the human shape survive? Partly because it was cheap. It was easy to build from whatever a farmer already had. From a distance, it could also make a field look occupied. It warned birds and people that someone cared about this land, even when the owner was somewhere else. But the shape carried something more powerful than fear. It carried presence. Priapus stood in a garden because the farmer could not stand there all day. The straw figure took the place of a worker who could move and shout. Kuebiko stayed in one field and became the god who knew the wider world. Nagoro's figures now sit inside the spaces left by a disappearing community. That is why the scarecrow feels both familiar and unsettling. It looks like a person from far away. Then we move closer and discover that nobody is there. The story really did begin with birds, but over thousands of years, it also became a story about absence and our need to fill it. If you enjoy finding the hidden history inside ordinary things, subscribe. There is another story every week. And tell me which image stayed with you: the child alone in the English field, the god who could never walk, or the silent classroom in Nagoro. Because after all this time, the scarecrow is still doing the same quiet job, standing where no one else can.